So you've read the title. Maybe you're thinking, what in the world could this utter buffoon possibly be talking about? Or maybe you're thinking, this sounds like the kind of brain rot that would normally come out of Deltarune theories about metaphysics and not just the lore of some Roblox game. Just hear me out for a bit, yeah? I'm convinced there is a non-zero possibility that our depressy bestie Morden may actually be the infamous Dark Wizard trying to turn over a new leaf or seek redemption in some way. And there's evidence in his very name. First, before we get into the evidence, let's establish one thing to be clear. Acheron is totally alive, right? Like, in the new pages of Wisdom from Full Release, Athena states that she doesn't know what the outcome of the encounter between him and the Arcane Adventures protagonist was. Which, come on. If they don't die on screen, they aren't dead. They didn't even say he died. We have no reason to assume he couldn't be kicking around, getting up to brand new shenanigans. Now, back to why Morden is totally him. Exhibit A, some somewhat vaguer connections first. Thematic connections, as it were, like his name. Morden. Mortem is Latin for death. Lots of death-related words derived from Latin have that more sound, think morbid. He also has the literal death curse and dresses in all black. He's the death guy. Come on. Now let's take a look at our old best enemy Acheron. He actually used to be called Durza, and then had his name retroactively changed in the lore to Acheron by Vetex. So it seems like surely this new name must have some significance to the plot. So, does it? Well, Acheron is the name of a river in the Greek mythology underworld, which is especially relevant because the Acheron we knew and hated in Arcane Adventures was known for summoning undead minions to do his bidding. Overall, also pretty death-themed, quite the edgelord of the lot of them. But this isn't the biggest similarity between their epithets that we've got. Don't believe me? Well then riddle me this, Batman. Why the scallop is Morden called that? The curse thief? As far as we know from his journal, he sort of just picked up the death curse off the ground like a cool penny on the Dark Sea sidewalk. That's not really stealing at all, except insofar as the fact that other people were also trying to find it. You can't call this guy a thief and then let Indiana Jones get away with being an explorer. Surely there must be some other reason. Oh, right. What about that other guy who was constantly stealing curses all over the world at such a terrifying rate that basically everybody knew him for it? The guy who had the special absorption power that let him steal things and was literally referred to as the Magic Thief for stealing curses. Mr. Curse Thief Acheron. Curse Thief Acheron and Curse Thief Morden sitting in a tree and, well, not kissing because they're probably the same person, but you get the idea. And if that's still not enough evidence, on the topic of that absorption power, Athena's wisdom, which I imagine is probably a pretty infallible source of lore, calls it the absorption blessing. This, my friends, is what we in the Evil Nerd Club call a retcon. You see, in Arcane Adventures in the Arcane Chronicles book, Acheron's ability was labeled the Absorption Curse, not Blessing. What could possibly be the purpose of making what seems like an arbitrary change to the terminology and nature of that ability through Athena's more reliable narration? Well, consider this. Curses are obvious. Magic users can sense a curse user like a beacon of power, and the curses physically change the individual wielding them, which we see firsthand happen to Morden with the death curse in the recent story parts. So what if the reason for this retcon is that having the absorption curse would have caused Acheron pretending to be a normal person to make no sense at all? Instead, it has to be the absorption blessing, because a blessing is subtle. Think about it. It has no visual effect on your character when you acquire Athena's blessing in-game, and no NPC comments on or notices it, that I know of. Morden could totally have possessed Hades' blessing this entire time, and nobody would be any the wiser. And furthermore, On the topic of that absorption blessing, we hear in Arcane Adventures and in the Arcane Chronicles book that the reason Acheron desired that ability in the first place was because he couldn't cast magic. Morden, lo and behold, is one of the only story characters who does not seem to be able to cast any magic of his own. And before you say, but Acheron becomes one of the most powerful mages in existence by stealing energy, the Arcane Chronicles explicitly say that he used literally all of it up in the attack that created the Darksea. Also within the Arcane Adventures is like the only physical detail we have about Acheron from anywhere, and it's specifically that he has black curly hair. You know who else has a mop of black hair?
Morden!
This freaking guy has to be him! Oh, sorry, I quite lost my composure there. I hope at this point I've convinced you that this grand deception is at least possible, because that's pretty much all the hard evidence or obvious connections I've noticed. However, there are still some character elements to consider that I think make this more likely rather than less. For instance, Morden's reluctance to kill and unusual wariness of curses in general.
Remember, he's never actually given us a reason for his stark fear of losing himself to the death curse. You could argue that he's just a chill guy who's careful about that kind of thing naturally, but I think it's far more interesting to speculate about potential causal factors in his past, such as, for instance, if he had first-hand experience. If he had lost himself, say, to the warping nature of curses and killed a ton of people in the past, like Acheron. And perhaps he wants to avoid the possibility of that happening again, to escape the cycle, as it were.
Yeah, woo. Alright, time to wrap it up. If you think all this is nonsense, or just noticed something I didn't, comment down below as to why. I'd love to get involved in more discussion on the lore of this game. And before I end the video, there's also some potential interesting implications I could talk about related to if Morden is Acheron, who we are in relation to him. Like, was he telling the truth about us being friends? If he was, were we absolutely horrendous? Like, seriously, it would take an absolute piece of work to stay friends with Prime Acheron. Alternatively, and what I think is kind of the more likely possibility, what if Morden was lying about us being friends before the amnesia? I could totally see him lying to even himself in his journal with his mental state. What if we were mortal enemies and he's pretending otherwise to get a fresh start? Personally, I just think this would be an awesome twist, but either way, I'm excited to see what Videx cooks up in future updates. So far, we have been eating good. See ya.